Well, as promised, folks, we are bringing back, from a couple of weeks ago, we had Stephen Watson of Off-Road Design, who came on to originally talk to us about Z71s, and we got sidetracked talking about UA and awesome builds.
We covered it.
Well, we did. We did talk about as much as we knew, which was almost nothing, all of us, about the Z71s. But we didn't have enough time to talk to Stephen Watson about one of the most historically important things in the off-road / truck world.
The Model T.
The Model T. No, not the Model T.
I'm wrong.
The introduction of the square body Chevy truck. Now, in 73, you had the square body Chevy and the dent side Ford, but the dent side Ford doesn't really count because it was just a rehash of an older design. But the 73 Chevy truck was pretty much an all new design, and it was awesome, and it lasted all the way through till about 91 for the civilians, and I think 92, 93 for the commercial and military vehicles. Very, very long run on the square body Chevys. We want to talk about square body Chevys, but we also want to talk about off-road design. So we're going to get Stephen Watson again on the phone as our first, I think he's our first two-time, no, I'm sorry, Chad's been a two-time guest.
Yes.
Yeah, so He'll be our second two-time guest on the Wheelin'. He has the great honor. Let's talk to him
that means
today.
They're tied, right?
Oh, there we go.
We'll
right.
have to do a tiebreak.
It's time to hit the trail, lock in those hubs, and throw it into low range. Because you are listening to Wheelin' with Keith and Johnny Orange, broadcasting from the Thin Line Off-Road Studio. They're here to talk about 4x4s, trucks, and everything to do with enjoying the great outdoors. Buckle up. Here's your hosts, Keith and Johnny Orange.
All right, Stephen, do we have you on the line, sir?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you just
Welcome
fine.
back.
Perfect. We are winning.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been an entertaining 2 weeks. We now know who the president is. I mean, it's going to be great going forward here, man.
Sure, John, sure.
So I put up an Instagram post about that at about that time, and what I decided was that Red Rocks won. They're better than Blue Rocks.
Oh, there you go.
I've been in Moab over it was a week ago or whatever, a couple weeks back, and yep, I decided the Red Rocks are better.
I do like
all the
Moab.
results are in. It was unanimous. Red Rocks are better. So
I want to get to Moab so bad.
Well, sir, I tell you,
it's a thing that you have to do.
There was
Anybody that enjoys doing anything off-road or outdoors has got to go there.
There was kind of a thing when I used to play a lot of the original Xbox system, and there was a game, trying to remember the title, but it was an off-road racing game. And that was one of the first real bites into the bug that I had of kind of, virtual, obviously, building trucks and running off-road stuff with it. And I fell in love with it, and Moab was one of my favorite tracks in the game to play.
You got to see it in person, though, John.
Oh,
you
yeah.
really do.
Seeing the pictures, the videos, hearing the stories of people who have been there, I must go. I have to.
We'll need to do a Wheelin' podcast trip, get all these former guests out together or something. That'd be fun.
That would be awesome.
We'll
discuss this later.
Guys from back east, especially when you get to a place where you can see all of the geology, there's no trees in the way. There's very little dirt. It's just such a different environment. And then, driving on some of the trails where you're just driving on slick rocks that are, billions of cubic yards. You're driving on pure rock for miles.
That's cool.
And it's a pretty amazing experience. The whole thing is just so much different than anything else that it really makes it fun. And even guys, I had a buddy that has been on dirt bikes and off-road stuff and, factory UTV engineer, driver that I met down in Moab. And he had an amazing time, and this guy's far from an off-road rookie and just was over the top loving driving around in Moab because it was different.
That's cool.
So it's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Well,
So that can probably come back around to getting you back where you started from, Keith, with trying to get this podcast started before I derailed it, talking about Moab.
Well, what I wanted to talk about more was, as we talked about in 71, you were very instrumental in, I already had the interest in the off-road world, but you were instrumental in being one of the first people that really reached out and helped me to see my vision, and I'm forever grateful for that. And then I didn't even get to meet you in person for another 16, 18 years, whatever it was, on UA, which was really awesome to finally meet this guy who, had taken some time out of his day to really help me. But I'm interested in, the square body Chevy truck came out in 73, and, as we know, it ran for basically 20 years. And there's a lot of cool history about it, and we could get into a history-heavy episode. And if we have time, maybe we can talk about some of the history, or you can tell us about some of the really cool points in the square body Chevy history. But at the same point, you've got such an awesome company, Off-Road Design. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are the founder of that company, correct?
Yeah, I started it up and kind of ran things myself for a couple of years, and then it became really obvious that I was going to need help. And it, I don't want to say in place of the first employee, because it was way more than that, but ended up partnering with my dad to run kind of the shop side of things. And then, from then we started putting on, some employees here and there, but yeah, I started it. My dad and I are still partners in it, and my mom actually works in the office some still. She's kind of moved out of that, but for a while it was her full-time gig, helping us with all of the super important behind-the-scenes stuff. So it's been kind of a family deal, but yeah, I started it up in the garage as a fresh guy out of college.
That's awesome.
So what product got you into the industry? Like, what did you start Off-Road Design with?
So I was a mechanical engineer, went to Colorado State in the ME program. And prior then, I had been doing a lot of off-roading stuff, but not recreational. And I'd been into, I had four-wheel drive magazines. I think I can still go back and find stuff into the mid-'80s. And, my parents had a 74 Blazer when they moved to Colorado in 77. They bought that because it became real obvious that the big car that they were driving wasn't going to work up here in the wintertime. And they traded that off and got an 82 Blazer that I still have the remains of now. They picked that up in 83, and I started driving that in 89 when I turned 16. And it was a 6.2 diesel truck, which
Nice.
is somewhat ideal for a 16-year-old, but they also are naturally going to hate it because it had no power. But I drove that for a little while, and then it was obvious I was going to be going over we live on the western slope of Colorado, and there's a couple of giant passes to get to anything on the Front Range. And for going to school over there, it was obvious I was going to need something with a little bit of horsepower to handle a hill. So we built a 383 for it, and then we promptly built a transmission for it. And ended up with a little bit of lift on it. And I met some buddies in college that were more into recreational off-road stuff and started getting into that. One had an FJ40 that he bought, kind of built. It had a pair of Lockrights in it, some 33-inch swampers, and had the 4-speed tranny and the 3-speed transfer case, which is really a 2-speed transfer case, but it's the transfer case that came behind the 3-speed tranny and had a deeper gear. So this thing was an off-road beast for us at the time.
That was a monster truck. It was 33-inch tires, right? I've told that story in the podcast before. One of my first off-road buddies had a Nissan hardbody with 33-inch tires. Back in the day, it's funny what was big to us,
Oh, and those things, super aggressive, and he just idled through mud holes that none of us could get through, and and that was the beginning. We started. Next thing you know, I've got a 3/4 ton axle swap in my Blazer and a locker in it, and could never get crazy with the tires at the time because I had to drive it a lot. It was my only rig, and driving a couple 100 miles to school a couple of times a year and so on. But started building things up, and I got out of college and had taken pretty good care of making sure that I didn't have a bunch of debt. I worked construction jobs the whole way through and had some scholarships. So I managed to get out of school and had some freedom, which was, it's a thing that I tell people a lot now is, anything you can do to build that into your life is a good idea, because it lets you, kind of gives you the freedom to look at what you want to do rather than what you have to do. But I was able to spend some time figuring out, and I'd come up with a sway bar disconnect. Back to your question about what product started it, that was, mid-90s is when things were really taking off, and things were advancing faster in the four-wheel drive world, I guess is a way to put it. And, people are looking at suspension technology, and, XJs had been around for a while. And, YJs, of course, were the big deal then. And disconnecting the sway bar, became visible. People figured that out, and it was like, oh, well, I can disconnect the sway bar on my Blazer and it works way better, but of course it drives nice with it hooked up. So I came up with a sway bar disconnect for it. And I got out of school, and like I say, I had a little bit of time to be able to figure things like this out and didn't have a bunch of pressure. My dad, some of your listeners might remember I talk about, my dad grew up in a refinery, worked on power plant stuff, worked in mines, worked commercial and residential construction up here. And so we basically had a fab shop out of our garage, and I was able to build some of the pieces, built bumpers for my rig, and, had fabricated this one-off set of sway bar disconnects. And I met a guy named Chris Overacker that had a local four-wheel drive shop here that did some really cool pre-runner stuff. He was into full-size Jeep trucks and had raced them. I don't know that he'd actually raced Baja stuff at the time, but he'd run a couple of Mint 400s and done some other desert stuff. And he was starting Mountain Off-Road Enterprises, which is still going as a Jeep business, and they built a bunch of cool things. And I kind of looked at what he was doing, and building shackle reversal kits that I actually welded some of those up when I was getting started. It's like, well, I can do this. He builds things and advertises them in magazines, and and sells these four-wheel drive parts. And I didn't have any real commitments, so there was a quiet time sitting on a mountain trying to figure out what the heck I was going to do with my life. It's like, well, I'm going to try this out and see where it goes. And Chris invited me to go on a trail ride, a photo shoot with him, to go down to Grand Junction and do a shoot. He was showing off this shackle reversal buggy leaf system and doing it with Four Wheel and Off-Road magazine. And the editor that was working on it, a guy named Ed Fortson, lived in Grand Junction and was actually building a full-size Chevy project. He had a late 70s stepside truck. And he and I hit it off on this photo shoot. I was able to, help set up shots, and, kind of really understood what he was looking for, and, and how to make all this stuff look good and make his life easier. And it turns out he's got a Chevy truck, and I'd taken a set of sway bar disconnects with me. He's like, wow, that is an amazing idea. We're writing a story about that.
Cool.
And so that, that was the very beginning right there. And then that same trip, we stopped by a local four-wheel drive shop in Grand Junction there, and Jim Allen drives by. And Jim is writing for Four Wheeler magazine, and has an 83 Blazer that is his magazine project, and just getting started building everything on it. And he swings in and stops by, and I have a set of sway bar disconnects in my backpack, and it's like, hey, check this thing out. He's like, holy cow, we have to write an article on this. And I mean, just like that, I'm in the two big magazines, and this was a time when that was the media source. So, I have a phone number set up. It routes into my bedroom in my parents' basement next to the garage. And, these magazines come out, and all of a sudden people are calling up and ordering sway bar disconnects. And it's like, wow, maybe this will work. And, next thing, another, I guess, big media influence is David Freiberger was editor of Peterson's, and he wrote an editorial about, somehow it was something about a shackle flip. There's so many of these cool ideas. We need people building this stuff. And one of the things he brought up was a shackle flip. And I was like, well, I think I maybe had even built one by that time for my own rig. And I'd seen some others around. One that Chris Overacker did in his shop, is his local four-wheel drive shop. He just built a one-off. And it's like, well, that is a good idea. And I guess I'll build that now. Freiberger said so. And next thing you know, we put a shackle flip on Ed Fortson's truck, and we put a shackle flip on Jim Allen's truck, and we write magazine articles, and we go on trail rides down in Moab for Jeep Safari, and it's like, wow, all of a sudden I have more work than I can handle.
Nice.
And that's what really kicked it off right there.
That's crazy. So you all started out with shackle
sway bar
disconnects, and then eventually shackle reversals and things like that. And so, but I mean,
Yep.
you got into so much more, though. I mean, today the company. I mean, what are your major products today? What you do the doublers? You do the do you do IFS to solid axle swap kits? If I'm mistaken, no, yes.
Yeah. Well, and one thing, let me jump back to that sway bar disconnect real quick, because it's
Please do.
and I should have remembered this story to start with, but it kind of shows, we started doing things because we were using trucks, and we needed things to make them work better. And the first thing that I ever sold was a set of sway bar disconnects, and I actually sold it up on the top of the Gold Bar Rim Trail down in Moab. And another situation, I was up there on a trail ride, another guy on another trail ride. We start talking. I look at his Blazer, and the sway bar's hooked up. And this is a kind of a bony trail, and ride's rough, and there's some articulation stuff getting into it. It's like, you should unhook your sway bar, and I have this thing, that you can hook it back up. And right there, money changes hands. And the very first thing that we sold, and it's something I like to keep in mind, is it was on the trail. That's what we do, and it's a pretty neat story, because not everybody gets that.
Not everybody sold their first product in Moab on a trail.
So I have a question
actually
for you
out
then.
in the dirt.
Do you keep a set of sway bar disconnects on you at all times, just in case, because of how it all started?
I probably should, but I don't.
Yeah.
So, I have a business card now.
That works too. That works too.
Yeah, but I thought that was pretty cool, and it shows all this stuff is really trail oriented, and you talk about where we're at with our product line now, and a lot of it evolved out of the square body trucks, because that was the big deal. Was that's what I had. That's what I started four-wheeling, and we started figuring out ways to make everything work better. And that's why we developed all the stuff that we did is, hey, this doesn't work. This steering system is broken. When I go four-wheeling, I can't turn left. We got to do something different. Hey, I need deeper gearing because, I can't do this stuff. I'm roasting trannies. I don't have any control. So we came up with a doubler kit.
Hang on real quick on that, because while you're on that, and that was something I Are you the original inventor of the 203, 205 doubler kit?
No, like most things in the world, nobody really knows who actually came up with a lot of this stuff.
There was some homebrew
the shackle
stuff
flip,
beforehand or something?
Yeah, I'd seen, the shackle flip. I'd seen people doing one-offs before, and we kind of commercialized it. We built a bolt-on thing that a guy could buy and put on their truck.
Nice.
And similar thing with the doubler kit. I thought it was more original than it was when I found out later. But, I've heard rumors of guys in Iceland gutting 203s and using the reduction box in the 70s. And, that I have no evidence of any of that. It's, just kind of been a rumor. But come to find out, Adam Woodley at Wide Open Design, his dad built doubler kits for years, and I have no idea how far back that goes, but it was local stuff for local guys. And Wagoner Machine was a similar way. They were a shop in Oklahoma that, none of it was commercial. You didn't find anything in the magazines. But if you lived anywhere near there and knew those guys from the trails or whatever, they could get you a doubler kit built. And we took the idea, and like I say, I kind of thought it was more original and then found out that other people had been doing it. But really our claim there is that we commercialized it, turned it into something that we had all of the parts in one place and even the support pieces for being able to build you a complete 203. We could build the reduction box, put our adapter on it, send you the whole thing to bolt on your tranny. We could build you a complete 205. And we still do these things. So you could order a complete package, or if all you need is the adapter to put your 203 and your 205 together, we can do that. And it isn't, there's always little variations, and, you gotta be able to mess with stuff, but, for the most part, it's bolt-in stuff and you just put it together. So that was kind of our deal. Is some of it seems pretty original, and then you find out it's really not. And I think it's that way for most of the off-road world. One of the things I was going to bring up there earlier too is chromoly axle shafts. That was a huge deal there in the late 90s. Warren came out with those chromoly axles, and for Dana 44s, and it was huge. And now all of a sudden these axles are whatever percent stronger, and that was a groundbreaking use of that material. And we ended up I had the first set of Warren's 10-bolt axle shafts, and there was actually some machining stuff that we had to collaborate back and forth with them a little bit to get them machined right to fit in the 10-bolt carrier. But then I'm talking to some old desert race guys, and they're like, oh yeah, there was this team down in Phoenix that was running the old Jeep Honcho trucks in the 80s, and they couldn't keep axle shafts in them, and so they turned out these billet 4340 Dana 44 axles. I was like, what?
Yeah, that's some pricey stuff back then.
Cool for the time.
Cool though, yeah.
Yeah, that's a guy standing at a manual machine turning these things out of a chunk of bar. No forgings involved. So
long day.
Yeah, everything that we think is new, somebody's probably thought of it before, but it may not just be fully refined, fully commercialized, fully set up as something that the bugs are worked out, that kind of stuff.
Well, that's what I'd like to say there too. I've personally never run a 203, 205 doubler, but I've known and wheeled with many people that have. And something that I have known and observed firsthand over the years, without mentioning names of, say, potential competitors or anything like that, but there have been in some of the lower scale production outfits, there have been issues with engagements, machining being slightly off because these are things were done by hand on a Bridgeport or whatever the case may have been. And people have had, mixed luck with some of the smaller outfits there. But I tell you what, in my now 20 years of wheeling and seeing, I don't know how many ORD 203, 205 doubler setups on the trail, I have never heard about anybody having an issue with any of your stuff. And like you said, you commercialized it. So in some manner of it, you put an engineering mind to this product and made it so it was, it was beyond the whack and tap with some parts in your garage to an actual produced product that you could have faith in. And, that's a very important thing, because a guy, building an off-road truck, the last thing he wants to do is take, his 1 or 2 weekends off that he can get from his day job a year, go out on the trail, and then all of a sudden break because of some crappy machining or something. I've never seen an issue with any of your products on the trail. I'm sure John hasn't either. And, that's, you may not have invented the product, but you sure enough put it into, you made it better, and you put it into the mainstream, and you created a product that people can have faith in.
Well, and that goes back. The reason why we do this stuff is to use it on the trails. It's all, it's kind of based on that. And one of my early four-wheeling experiences, again, back in college, I did a couple of trips out into Utah that kind of got me, these days you call it overlanding. We went camping with trucks, but I went out into the Maze District in Canyonlands, and one trip I went solo, and another trip I went with a buddy. We went into the Needles District. I did a trip out there with my brother into the Maze District. But on all of these, we were, either myself alone or another guy in one vehicle. We didn't have another rig with us. And especially when I'm out there alone, the Maze District is something everybody, you talk about Museum of Off-Road Adventure, that's a place that needs a citation there. You end up somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 miles from pavement. And when you get to pavement, you're still not anywhere. And those miles aren't straight. You can't straight line it in any way. There's canyons out there that, they call it the maze for a reason. You can get down there and get lost. And when you do that kind of off-road travel, you can't have things break. Stuff it has to be reliable, and it's something that's carried through with everything that we do. Is the number one thing, is it's got to stay together and get you home. And some of it is that experience of just being far from home and needing to trust your vehicle to bring you back. And some of it, it's interesting you bring up the vacation thing, because, man, we've had, talking about the doubler kit, we had one customer that was super notable along those lines, and really makes us remember that concept. Is this guy came down to Moab, had a bad trip the year before, had all kinds of steering problems, ended up riding with buddies on trails because his truck, I think it was a Blazer, didn't work, couldn't steer. This was broken, that was broken. He goes home, calls us, gets a bunch of parts. We do suspension pieces, we get a steering system set up. He puts a doubler kit in it and has a local training shop install the doubler for him, gets everything in. He shows up in Moab, and it's jumping out of gear. And my dad and I were down there at the Jeep Safari show, and end up at the end of the day, we took our display apart, took his truck apart, and mixed and matched all of the pieces that we had there to get his transfer case back together, because the training shop had not done things right. They had left out an entire bearing.
Oh, geez.
It was the input bearing for the 205. Oof. And not even machined the case. So fortunately we had a big bearing case, and, went through the whole system, rebuilt all of this stuff, got it put together. And that guy called up a week and a half later and was so happy, because he drove his truck every day of his vacation. That was the very beginning. They came down, they were going to do Jeep Safari and then stay for the week after. And you could tell he was dreading it. And we got everything together and working. and he wheeled all the trails he wanted to run. He did everything he wanted to do. He drove the truck everywhere he wanted to go. He drove it onto the trailer and took it home all in one piece and was so happy. And yeah, and that's the thing that we remember. Like you talk about that guy who's only got a couple weekends off, and you want to do your once in a lifetime trip out to Moab, or wherever it is that you want to go, South Dakota or whatever. You just want your truck to work. It needs to be a tool. It needs to stay together and let you have fun on your vacation. And that's something that's never lost on us. That reliability is number one.
That's really awesome to hear. And, I think that that's also proven by the fact that, you get out there on the trail, you do UA, you do other events. I'm always seeing pictures and things like that out there. Obviously, you were doing this wheeling way before people were doing it for the Instagram or for the gram. You're a true hardcore off-road wheeler who also is in the industry of producing parts. Being in this industry myself, living in the greater Detroit, Michigan area, I know a lot of people in the parts production business. And I can't tell you, the majority of them produce parts, sell the parts, put the parts out into the world, but they don't actually use them. They're not a hobbyist. They might build one, kind of like show vehicle that, the old quote unquote SEMA build. I've been out to SEMA. I've seen, the pros and cons in that. They build something and they send it out and that's it. But, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to bring you on the podcast, and now for the second time, is because you're a true hardcore wheeler. You're somebody that has been in this industry. You reach out to your customer. You go above and beyond with your customers. Just awesome. And I know we're kind of running short on time here a little bit, but, Stephen, I would love for you to, tell us, a little bit more about essentially like what is your product line, what do you specialize in? Our listeners, I would bet most of our listeners have heard of off-road design, but for those of them that have not, what kind of vehicles do you build stuff for? What is your main product line?
What's your favorite product?
Oh, I like that. What's your favorite product?
I am a pretty big suspension guy. I like good ride quality. I like being able to cover terrain fast and smooth. And sometimes fast isn't even going fast. That's something that we've found, fast in the desert is a whole different story than fast in the forest. And, up here, it could be being able to just go over a rough section of road at 12 to 15 miles an hour. You could be flying doing 12 miles an hour over some of this rough stuff. And if you're doing that comfortable, that's always amazing. I hate getting beat up. I hate beating the rig, and suspension is what does that. And that was one of the early things that I started working on. And the extension of that is we've got a pretty good custom spring line where we design custom springs. We've got a local builder that we work with to build everything absolutely to all of our specs. When you call up and say, this is what I have, this is what I want to do with it, these are the things that I've added that add more weight, and what I've got going as far as all the, bumpers and winch and, what I'm doing. We spec out how many leaves, what thickness, lengths of everything, and you end up with a leaf spring that rides way better than people will give any credit to for a leaf spring. And I'm not going to go as far as saying that this is coil spring ride quality, at least until you get into longer travel coil spring stuff. When you get into coilovers and longer travel coils, it is a different world. But on a leaf sprung truck, you can make them work so well, and it's so simple, and it bolts onto these square body trucks. Well, it bolts onto all these Chevy trucks. The 72 and older, the 73 and newer. With our solid axle kits on the 88 to 98 trucks, we bolt our custom springs into those, and you've got like our 99 that we talked about the last time that we've had on the Ultimate Adventure trips. It's just a super simple, durable truck that rides nice off-road and flexes well off-road and stays together. And that's one of my favorites. And then I guess the extension of that is we do have coilover kits for the squares that go back into the 72 and older also. And we're looking at expanding that kind of forward into some of the newer platforms with the solid axle swaps. And man, when you guys may have seen some pictures of our tan convertible truck, and that thing is pretty amazing. Riding in that is, it's borderline an Ultra 4 car, with a truck skin on it, and it works great. So, yeah, suspension definitely, and that's a bit of a blurb on our custom spring line, and the coilover packages just let you travel over rough terrain without beating you up, and it makes you feel like after you've been on vacation for a day that you've actually been on vacation.
Nothing worse than getting done with a trip or something and you just feel like you beat. So that's
right.
Awesome.
Yeah,
and it's so hard on the rig too.
I love that.
And the back.
I love that you're taking this technical approach to things, and putting modern technology, the coil, like you said, going to coil springs or coil. Do you say coil springs or coilovers for the square bodies now?
Coilovers.
Coilovers. So you're doing and this is a bolt-on kit.
You don't get to bolt this level of stuff on.
You got to weld a little bit.
You gotta weld, and we give you all the tools to do it pretty darn easy. I mean, as easy as you can do something that's that major of a modification. And the results when you're done, the trucks drive great, and that's something that people don't give enough credit to, and kind of comes around the square body market, and we should probably talk about some square body tech here at some point on your square body episode. But
it's all you, man. It's all you. Market,
yeah, those trucks are, they're getting old enough, and they're starting to get a little bit valuable now. And a lot of guys are, this is the truck that I had in high school, or like that truck, or this was my grandpa's truck, or whatever. They don't want to beat them up, and they shouldn't. The days are over when you do the things to a vehicle like I did to my Blazer. But you still want to enjoy the truck. And, we've come up with this term Sunday trucks, therefore going to get Sundays on Sundays. And you want it to drive nice and look nice, and, you want an engine that fires up. What you have to do is take away all of the reasons to not drive the truck. Because most of us have another car. You've got the nice truck. It's your work truck, or it's your tow rig, or you've got your wife's car. Whatever the situation might be, there's usually something else to drive. And we try to take away the excuses for you to not drive the cool truck. And
I like that.
When your wife doesn't like how it rides, well, let's fix that. Let's make it so that it's not bouncy driving over everything and rattles everybody's teeth out. And let's make it where it feels good when you drive it. So, when you go around those couple of sharp corners by your house, that the steering doesn't feel all sloppy. And, let's get an engine in it that makes you want to drive it, that it's fun. It starts every time, and you don't have to think about, is the fuel pump going to work, and is this thing going to start because I haven't touched it in a month, and the carb always plugs up, just all that stuff. Let's get rid of those things and make it to where you want to drive the cool truck, and suspension is a big part of that. Like I say, the steering response with the coilover setups, and even the ride quality with the custom leaf springs can make that to where it's that truck for you.
So what you're doing these days is you're bringing 21st century comfort to 1970s technology, essentially.
We're really trying.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah, that's a really cool way to do things. And like you said, these square bodies have gotten a lot more valuable. We can always do in the future a square body history episode. John and I can do those history episodes. We do heavy tech and stuff. But, knowing that you're such a big square body guy, as well as other trucks and in the doubler industry and all the other things, I think it was more important to talk to, I've kind of always considered you like Mr. Square Body Chevy guy. I mean, I know that your business idea and your business plan is for other vehicles as well, but I'm sorry, Steven, you're kind of stuck with that. Like, you're known to be the Square Body Chevy guy out there.
And the sway bar disconnect guy.
Well, yeah, right. Now the sway bar disconnect guy.
Yeah, sure.
A couple of years ago, a few years, whenever, coming home from the SEMA show, there was always this push. You got to move into the new vehicles, and man, you look at all the big lift kit companies, and it's a race to get the newest thing out. And now it's getting the newest CAD files before the vehicle's released, so that you can have a suspension ready for it when this new model hits the showroom floor, and be ready to lift the truck when it comes off the dealer lot. And we're coming home from SEMA at one point, and there were so many square bodies floating around, and so much of this old stuff being built and used, and all the cool products for it. People doing all the engine swap parts and cool tranny swaps and on and on. And we just had this thought. It's like we could work on square bodies for the rest of our lives, and it would be okay. We could make a living doing this. And especially, you look at early Broncos, they didn't even build 250,000 of those things. They built more Blazers in 1 year than they ever built little Broncos. And there's, I don't know how many little Bronco specialty companies. So, we did have that thought that, square bodies could be enough. But, man, like I say, I have this curiosity. When I sat up on the side of the mountain, but across from my parents' house, wondering what I was going to do, and decided that I was going to do this and see where it went. I'm still trying to carry that curiosity in, and we're starting to play with IFS now and see where that goes, because that technology has increased so far. And I'm a co-driver in an IFS Ultra 4 car that's just amazing what that thing will do, even in the rocks. And it's definitely getting to a point where there's all kinds of cool new stuff, but we're definitely not abandoning the squares. There's such solid trucks. I mean, my 16-year-old's building one now. My 19-year-old has one sitting in the yard, and he's working circles around it on all kinds of other stuff. But they're cool vehicles for them to work on, and it's equally cool for my electrician buddy to have one that he drives every day, that he's got an L92 and a 6L80 in it, and I keep trying to talk him into putting some coilovers on it to just ice the cake and and make it to where it doesn't rattle his teeth when he hits potholes. They're just a super cool platform to work with.
That coilover setup that you're talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, on the square body Chevys, wasn't the 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive frame the same?
They're really similar, but they're not the same.
Oh, okay.
They're close enough to where, like doing coilovers, it's essentially a 4-wheel drive conversion. When you start looking at bolt and leaves on them, we actually have a new hanger kit to put, to do a main eye hanger, so you can convert them with the leaf springs. So there are games to play off of the 2-wheel drives, and they were coil sprung, but none of that's very useful as far as making a 4-wheel drive truck work right. So we actually played around a little bit with coil springs by themselves, and the packaging is tough. It's not impossible, but it really just came down to, it's so easy to put a coilover in there and have a really good quality shock, have a very tunable spring rate, and mount it up by welding a pair of tabs onto something to bolt them onto, that we started focusing that direction, and it's worked out really well.
Well, I guess my question was, can somebody use your coilover kit to turn a 2-wheel drive square body into a 4-wheel drive? I mean, obviously they got to do the trans and transfer case work and all that, but will the frame work?
Oh yeah, definitely. The contours of the frame are very similar. It just comes down to bracketry. And when you're doing our coilover kit, you're not using any of the frame bracketry to work with. So the frame rails work fine. And I mean, that even flows out Dodge trucks. You know, the 70s and 80s Dodge trucks are so similar to a Chevy that we've had guys use our coilover kit on Dodges.
Yeah, the spring perch width is basically the same. They're about 32 inches on the spring perch between the Chevy and the Dodges and all that. So the frame, man,
the frames are real close. So lots of options there for doing coilovers and two-wheel drives to convert.
Well, Stephen, not to cut you short, but we are kind of getting towards our time limit, and our phone signal's coming in and out a little bit here too. It sounds like John wants. He's got a question.
One more question for you. So the last time we spoke with you, I made a note, and I wanted to ask you about this. Your phone number 970-945-7777. You said there's a story to that.
Yeah, there's a story for everything, but. So that, to get a commercial phone number that you got to pick was, I forget what the number was, but it had hundreds of dollars associated with it at a time that I wouldn't have paid $20 for a specific phone number. But I was living in my parents' basement, so we had residential phone there, but then when we moved our shop, you know, I wanted to get that 47's phone number, and the only way I could do it was if you requested it for residential, they just gave you the phone number. So we just kind of had an apartment at our shop for a while. And so I just requested that phone number for my residential line at the shop and got the phone number. And then after a couple of years, it just kind of got rolled into the business line queue, and we were able to get the number. But yeah, I remember that, and it may have been like $500 at the time, but you know, it was. I mean, shoot, at that point, that was a set of tires.
Yeah,
you know, when all I cared about was gas and tires, you know, that was a big deal. So, yeah, that's the deal. Is I had to get that for my residential number to start with.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Well,
it's recognizable and has stood the test of time.
Absolutely.
Very, very cool. I tell you what, you know, you've been a blast to talk to, and I think we're going to have you on yet again in the future at some point, especially when we get into, you know, maybe I've thought before, maybe we should do an entire episode just on doublers, and I think you would be a great guy to talk about those. You know, a number of other things. You know, you're just so, the problem here is you're so entrenched in this industry that, you know, just like any good storyteller, just like any good person that's been in this industry forever, you've had so much experience and so much time. You know, our listeners, I'm telling you what, if you are building a Chevy truck, or you want to put a doubler, or you want to do a solid axle swap on an IFS rig or something, you really need to be giving Off-Road Design a call. I mean, these folks, as you can tell, we've been talking to Stephen here in episode 71 and 73. Such passion for this industry, and such passion for this hobby and this lifestyle. Stephen, you know, I don't want to cut you short or anything like that, but is there anything that you've got going on right now that you'd like to plug? Is there anything that our listeners really need to pay attention to that you've got going on right now that's really important to off-road design?
So I have one thing that's really not that related to just our business that I should throw out that, I don't know. I think it's important from a trail use standpoint. And it's something, like I say, we've been into this for the off-road use. I've been going on trails down in Moab since the mid 90s, and just from a trail use thing, it's something we see, and fortunately the Ultimate Adventure trips have kind of forced us into wheeling a lot of places that we wouldn't really go. And it's been it's really been great. I mean, I would never have driven to Maine to go four-wheeling, and I did. Yeah, and I'm appreciative of that opportunity. So one of the things that I see is four-wheeling back east is just different. And we talk about these super long trips that I've been on where you're super remote. And I know that's hard to find. You can't get that in Michigan or Indiana or, getting down anywhere really east of Denver. You don't find that. And it's something that people need to keep in mind is when you come out here, things are different. It isn't a park. You can end up really remote. You are really going into the outdoors. And in a different way. The trail etiquette is different. I know it was shocking to me when we went to some private parks back east, and I don't know if we were in Texas or Missouri or, farther north in Midwest or what, but, we had these farmers telling us they wanted us to drive down this fence line or whatever to get back to this trail that they had because they'd only cut it out a couple of months ago and it was already overgrown.
Gotcha.
And that is such a foreign thing for us because, especially in the desert, you get out on the Colorado Plateau and even out in the Mojave, and the terrain is pretty fragile. And, I know back there, especially on private ground, I totally understand how people don't care if you get off of a trail and go park over here or, go drive around a rig to go over there because it doesn't matter. This stuff will grow back. It's not impacted. There's so much moisture that things are not a problem. But out here, you really got to pay attention to it and I guess just to keep things short, do some research on trail etiquette for the area you're going to be in, and really think about, especially out here in the desert, stay on the trails, and think about this because we have a lot of trails being opened up and the more capable vehicles, and we're part of helping create this world. We've created out of our full-size GM some really capable vehicles, and you can go out and put a down payment on a Razor and have a very capable vehicle, or a down payment on a Jeep Rubicon and have a very capable vehicle. And there's a lot of people getting into the outdoors that didn't start there. They may be into it more for the sport side, but they're not as entrenched in that outdoor lifestyle and really need some help knowing how to handle themselves outdoors and make it so that we can still have vehicle access to a lot of these areas. And it is a lot different coming from back east. I bet a lot of your listeners, or most of your listeners, probably are there. And I guess it's just a request to know what you're doing when you come to a different place, no matter where it's at. And it could even be on our side. Like I said, I was shocked when we got to some of these parks back east, and they don't care where you go at all. Just, go, if you want to drive up that hill, go drive up that hill. That's fine. Take advantage of that because that's not what all the world's like. And, let's all keep it together and try to keep this stuff to where we can keep wheeling on it.
Absolutely. One of the things that we have continue to promote through the Museum of Off-Road Adventure is responsible trail usage. We stay anti-political on a purpose, but we try to get the people to, we're trying to outreach to younger generations and things like that for, saying, hey, this is something you can do. This is fun. Here's the history of the vehicles, but you can still go out and use these. And that's what we've got this same mindset. So, we're out of time today. But I tell you what, I'm gonna let Johnny Orange kind of talk to or let everybody know where to find us. But stay on the line here. We do have a couple of things that we want to talk to you about here. But Stephen Watson, once again, of Off-Road Design. If people need to get a hold of you, it's offroaddesign.com. Is that the website again?
Yeah, offroaddesign.com. There's contact us, all kinds of cool info. We're always putting up more stuff there. Socials, we got Off-Road Design on Instagram and on Facebook, and we can, we got messaging systems there, so we can help you out there. As Johnny mentioned, 970-945-47s. Always, works during the day. It doesn't go into my bedroom anymore, not for the last 20-something years. So, welcome to call. And, we've got a handful of people there that are, they're my people. They're like us. They four-wheel and know these trucks. And, we're all happy to help you out and get your truck doing what you want to do.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, thank you, sir.
John, where else can they hear from us?
So if you go on Facebook and search for 4x4 Talk, you can reach out and interact to Keith and myself on there, as well as the other listeners of Wheelin'. I got to give a huge shout out and a thank you to Mr. Andrew, our producer. Yet again, without him, none of this would be possible. You can also reach us on patreon.com/wheelinradio, access to our after show, The End of the Trail. A lot of bonus content there, a lot of extra stuff, a little bit more free range, shall we call it, than our normal show.
Sure.
And if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out to us and we'll go from there. So with that, thanks for listening and have a good one, everybody.